We'll call the meeting, special meeting of the Minot City Council to order for today, Wednesday, September 26, 2018. Just a quick reminder for folks to turn either off your cell phones, put them on silent or vibrate so that we can keep the distractions to hopefully a minimum. Roll call, please.
Janser.
Here.
Olson. Here. Pittner.
Here.
Padragula.
Here.
Straight.
Here.
Wolski. Here. Sitma.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3 on our agenda is ordinance number 5319, adoption of the 2019 annual budget on its second reading. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Alderman Janser, seconded by Alderman Olson. At this point, I would just offer up again a little bit of information leading into the motion for approval. For a lot of the folks that may or may not have been here for the first reading, which was also the public hearing for this, the budget itself, the budgeting process has changed substantially from the previous budgeting cycles and development practices from, I would substantially say, every previous governing body here. The principles that were set out were outlined by the elected officials and by the governing body and then crafted by staff and brought back, and that substantially is what is before us tonight. To this point, there has been significant discussion and debate about the budget itself and the details inside of it. More than 3.5 hours were spent at last week's public hearing devoted to taking comments, answering the questions, and ensuring that the accurate information was discussed regarding the proposed spending. Now, there is certainly at the top of the individual conversation and correspondence on top of that has taken place between all of the elected body and even staff regarding this budgeting cycle. And for folks, there has been significant an opportunity, I think, to review this on our website, which is minotnd.org, where you can find all of that budgeting information. The videos, the meetings, the documents, the frequently asked questions, and everything relating to this budget. I can't stress enough, this is the most access that we have had to this information, that the public has had to this information, and the different principles that all led us to this proposed spending. Now, I do want to say that I do fully support this budget that is before us tonight. I feel that it puts us on a fiscally responsible and sustainable path and gets us away from collectively kicking a lot of this spending down the road for future budgeting generations to worry about. Much of what is in front of us tonight is exactly the result of that. The corrections, I feel, are far from easy, and this is the very difficult decision that we have before us tonight. I support it simply because, based on that 5-year analysis that we have in front of us, that is on our website, again, this is a collective decision that gets us on a responsible path to where we don't have to keep coming back to the well and keep coming back for these tough decisions. Any further comment from the council? Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Sitma, thank you. I appreciate your comments. As I walked up, I noticed you write in some of your notes in terms of the thoughts you were going to share. And I came over and sat down a few minutes before the meeting to do the same thing. My first point, fiscal responsibility. My second point, this is a budget that I feel like we are acting in a responsible that is fiscally responsible as much this year as it is in year 2, as it is in year 5. I mean, these are the, we've been through this process together. I don't think it's remarkable that we would arrive at the same conclusion, but that's where I'm at. And so I feel very much the same with you. I'm going to support the budget. On a second point, and this is a little bit outside the scope of the city, and as we weigh this decision, I think the hardest part for me is acknowledging that the burden that this is going to place upon families I acknowledge that. I recognize it. Again, this is the decision that I think is the best choice, not only this year, but as much in year 2 as it is in future years as well. The other thing that I think for the community that we need to keep in mind, and that is probably the hardest part of this overall budget, and this is not related specifically to my role as a city council member, is the challenge this is going to create for the schools. I think one of the pressing and urgent needs for this community is a growing number of young students in our school system. There is, I think, an identified need to deal with our middle schools and at some point, very likely a second high school. It's not lost on me that this budget is going to create an environment whereby passing a school bond issuance through a passage of the voters by a 60-40 margin is going to be very, very difficult. And I think that's one of the pieces that makes this budget difficult to support. So at the same time, I think, though I think this is the right choice to make tonight, I would say I think one of our next priorities as a community is going to be to getting to work and supporting the school board as they attempt to solve that problem. So with that, I support this budget, and I appreciate everybody coming out to participate in this process.
Thank you, Alderman Walski. Alderman Patergula.
I wanted to echo your comments, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Walski. This is my 12th budget, and this is markedly different, as I've said before, the process, which is very important to me, the transparency, the opportunities for input, the tremendous amount of information we've given the citizens and the public. You know, my first budget was in 1998, and this is a world apart, and I'm very comfortable with the process. I'm not keen on the fact we have to raise taxes, but I think based on my knowledge of city government and the priorities that the administration has set based on our directives, I think we've done about all we can to minimize expenses, and I think we've done about all we can to maximize resources. The only thing that makes me pause, although we've, I think, over-relied on sales taxes, I think we're at a point with our infrastructure in particular where if we're to maintain the quality of that infrastructure and some of the challenges that lie ahead of us in the public works field, I think we really need to look at the possibility of a dedicated sales tax, maybe half a cent or something like that, to get our infrastructure where it should be. I don't see us ever catching up, and I'm very worried about the report we received a couple of meetings ago from a public works director about the roads, and we also were very concerned and knowledgeable, I think all of us, about or knowing about the water issues. I note that in Grand Forks, in this morning's Herald, there was a letter to the editor from Mike Brown. Dr. Brown is the current mayor of Grand Forks, and he's proposing and actively supporting a 1/2 cent sales tax increase for 20 years. I don't know it would need to be that long for us. But that's my one concern. We're not kicking the can down the road, but we're also not going too far in fixing some of the shortcomings that we and other cities have in North Dakota and throughout the whole country. And I'm not going to offer an amendment to this, but I really would like the city administration, you know, within a couple months to prepare for us a detailed analysis and a report looking at the pros and cons of looking at a dedicated sales tax. This would take some of the pressure off the property tax. I think that's pretty much peaked out. I think we've done about all we can to control expenses. I think we're doing a lot to bring in income when we can within the limits. The state sets some limits on us, for example, that we're going to try to lobby against in the legislature. But I think this infrastructure thing we have to take very seriously, and I see that as really the only option. So I'd like to see the staff take the time to prepare a detailed report about that option. We may choose to take that option or we may not. I think this is about as good a budget as we're going to get given the current constraints that we have. So I'm going to support it. And I want to reassure the public in my years of experience since 1998, the process is better than it's ever been. And I think it's very clear the city administration has taken seriously our directive that they minimize expenses. Mr. Lakefield and our city manager have clearly outlined and spelled out how we've done that, how they've done that. And we've also done our best to make the revenues consistent with the expenses. So I'm going to be supporting this budget. I think it's the best compromise that we can come up with.
A short reply in there, Alderman Patergula. Thank you very much for your comments as well on that. And I would certainly take a look at the sales tax issue down the road, perhaps past this next legislative session as we continue to work with our state legislators, looking at potential for access to the legacy fund dollars for flood control, as we do know that our limitations are in the not-too-distant future with our funding for that flood control. And without, I think, having some of those having those questions to those answers, it perhaps might be premature before we go through that mechanism, aside from the Hub City funding mechanism as well.
I would agree on that, Mr. Mayor. I think I just want them to start thinking about that, and I think you're right. I think we'll have to wait till the session is over because that'll make a huge difference, hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alderman Pontevill. Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mayor Sitma. I guess to Alderman Walski's point, I guess that's been my greatest concern all along. And we talk a lot about the IADC report and silos. I'm concerned that of just how we might get a little bit insulated because of our issues, and that's not wrong. I commend City Manager Barry and Mr. Lakefield that nobody wanted to inherit probably what they walked into in terms of some of the financial challenges, just like some of us didn't want to have to deal with the parking garages, but it is what it is. But my concern is really how this community is going to move forward on some of the other more pressing issues. And if we're not mindful of that, I think that is going to put us in an unbelievably precarious position, possibly, Mr. Mayor, moving forward. I recognize that we have some retention issues within the city. As I've stated before, and I see my neighbor in the audience as a firefighter. I want to give our service personnel everything they need for resources. I want to give city staff a pay increase. The challenge is what I see on the horizon, and that's why I cannot support the budget tonight, because I just feel that coming out of a flood, the natural disaster, and where we are, this is a big burden on taxpayers. And I'm not going to say I fear Mr. Pittner, because I thought about that word I used a couple of weeks ago, but I am very concerned about the challenges that lie ahead. I think we're going to face them straight on, Mr. Podragula, and so I appreciate you bringing it up, because if there's one thing that's happened in the last week is clearly the community is after us to address our financial situation in a manner that, to Mr. Pittner's concern, we're not putting all of our eggs into flood wall basket. We have to fund community and economic development. I think we all understand it. We have to build from within. So I think, Mr. Walski, I hope that we can have a conversation, Mr. Mayor, possibly through you, of how we can consider building a school or addressing some of our school needs without pushing our community further to the perimeter that we are ultimately going to have to fund and maintain. And so these are the issues. The people that are going to come out are the people that are so frustrated with us today, and that's my concern, and that's why I'm going to be voting against it tonight. But it's solely off of that challenge that I see on the horizon. And again, I recognize that Mr. Lakefield and Mr. Barry did the absolute best and are trying to rectify some problems they walked into. And I certainly, as somebody who came in on city council reform and change, I want things fixed yesterday, last week, and 6 years ago. And I know that this community, if there's one thing I've learned sitting up here and over the last couple of years, is things don't move that quickly within the city of Minot. And it's important that we are, in particular, over the course of this next year with our budget, that we are going to be very mindful of that. Because if we have some anomalies that arise and we have to consider that, that concerns me. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I thank you for allowing me to comment.
Absolutely, Alderman Straight. And I can respect at any time that we don't always necessarily see a unanimous vote, and especially on an issue such as this, where there are a lot of contentious implications with this. I look at it in supporting with me is addressing it the here and now, and addressing those issues of the past that have got us to where we're at today, and getting them addressed right now so that we don't have to continue to deal with them down the road, and we can start addressing some of the bigger issues, as Alderman Walski pointed out, with the schools and with those issues as they come up. And it will be the continual education and the support from the state legislators and the folks from the community to help understand what it is to get these taken care of now rather than seeing what happens in the future. So thank you, Alderman Straight, but I continue to throw my full-on support as addressing this now is more important than ever. Yes, Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to pontificate too long here on this. If I had to describe the budgeting process as the newest alderman on the board, on the council, I would be impressed with the process. We talk about, and I wasn't involved in budget processes of the past, but what I've seen are countless budget meetings, countless emails of information, discussions, looking at things from different perspectives, the prioritization of wants and needs in our community. And I really, really would like to thank not only the city manager, but the city staff, because this is not an easy process, and you're essentially shooting yourselves in the foot as well as us voting for this. We're all tax-paying citizens. We're in the boat together. I know that sometimes we get this image of being this kind of big brother, if you will, but we're in the same boat. We're all in this together, and don't question that for a minute. And if I took anything out from last week's public hearing is encouragement and I encourage people to be a part of the process, and not only at those public hearings, but be a part of the process even earlier. There's budget workshops that are open for the public to attend. There's city staff and all of us as aldermen that are available for your ideas and your suggestions at all time throughout the year. And I can only imagine how soon, being my first, not even my first full year, how soon next year's budgeting process is going to start, because I'm sure it'll be sooner than I can imagine. And again, I voted no last week because of a suggested change that I proposed to the budget. That's been addressed last night at the Committee of the Whole. I do support this budget. It has been gone through over and over again. You look at the numbers that were, if we wanted to address all of the issues that our community faces, we're looking at a heck of a lot worse budget than this. We really, really, really are. There's, as was said before, we were kidding ourselves on the cost of our government in the past. Right. And now we're rectifying that situation. We're no longer going to kick the can down the road. We've seen the mess. We're going to address it. Another thing that I encourage is from organizations that are in our community, organizations that are, at least to me, visualized as important cogs and important players in our community. This budgeting process is open for your input. This budgeting process is welcomes all of you as players in our community to contribute your ideas and your thoughts, and it's not the time to work in silos, as we've heard. It's the time to come together and collaborate, to incite fear through emails after the fact, after this process is wrapping up, after this process has been as transparent as I can possibly imagine it being. I really, really encourage those organizations to be a part of the solution and not the problem, because it's our responsibility and our duty as citizens of this community to work together. And that's my goal for next year, I guess, maybe, would be further collaboration, not only from city staff, aldermen, the council, but also the organizations that call this community home, because it's important that we come together and work together throughout the process and not after the fact.
Thank you, Alderman Pittner. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion before we vote? Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight,
No.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion passes. Number 4 on our agenda tonight is the resolution adopting the ND PERS. And that is, after adoption of the 2019 budget, it is recommended the City Council adopt a resolution to approve the joining North Dakota Employee Retirement Defined Benefit Program, ND FERS, effective January 1, 2019. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Pittner,
Second.
second by Alderman Janser. Any discussion? Any discussion? Last time, any discussion? Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Straight,
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Number 5, adjournment.
Moved.
Moved by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Wolski. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.